So in this video, we're going to talk about angular pipes. So angular pipes are very important to know. They're basically functions that you can use in template expressions. And for this template expressions, you basically accept a input value and it returns a transformed value. Here you can see we have an example. And basically, just to give you a quick rundown of what we're going to cover in this video, basically we're going to cover the basics of the pipe, as well as how can we chain multiple pipes, and then we can also create our own custom pipe, and we can also be able to use pipes within our component, detect changes when we when user change the input. And we can also be able to, in this video, we're also going to cover the differences between pure and versus impure for pipes. So here you can see that we have our application here, right? So we have this pipe demo component, and in our app component.html, we basically just display this. And then basically to use pipe, one simple example is that we can be able to use pipe to show or change the display data without changing the actual data. Here you can see that we have our current date, which is from this component right here, this component pipes demo component. We have our current date, which is a type date, and it is equal to the current date, right? And then if you look at our browser, you can see that our date is displayed, right? It's displayed in the first line, first paragraph here. And then if we want to change it to something like date, we can also change to here, right? So you can see that we change date from displaying data like this to something like this, where we only displaying the date. And we're not displaying the time, we're not displaying the time zone, and all that kind of stuff. We're just displaying the date. In this case, December 29, 2020, right? And then if we want to change the date to short date, it's another type of date. It will display something like this, right? And if we wanted to display the full date, it will be something like this, including Tuesday. Okay, so basically that's how we can do this. But the thing is that we're not changing the data. Like, even though we're changing how they look on the the page, but we're not actually changing the actual current date. So you can see that the current date is always the same, but these only those things are changed. Basically, like I said earlier, pipes are just functions. We basically take this input right here, and this will basically transform the data, and then we just display that in our page. And that's basically all that there is. And there's many other things, like other pipes, like you can be able to display the percentage. And I'm not gonna cover everything, but there's like a full list of that on what are some pipes that you can use for the Angular built-in pipes. But I'm not gonna cover everything in this video. I'm just gonna cover the most important things. The next thing that we're going to talk about is how to chain in pipes. You can also chain pipes too. So here you can see that we can have multiple pipes. We have date, we have uppercase, and you can see that here you can see we basically transform this current date from this to a date, and then we transform our date, the text, to a uppercase. Okay, so this is how we can be able to chaining multiple pipes. So I believe these are pretty easy to understand, but I want to talk a little more about how can we create our custom pipes. Well, so usually what happens is that if you want to create a pipe, you can just go to the console and then just type in ng generate pipes, and then the name of the pipe and so on. But I already have a pipe created in this application in the custom pipes folder. So you can see that here we have a basically is palindrome tests, right? And in our component, you can see we have is palindrome tests array. We have a couple strings, so it's basically a type of string array. And then what we're trying to do is we're trying to see if they are palindromes, if each string in the array are palindrome. And you can see that we're displaying that custom pipes, and this is the string, and we want to know if this is a palindrome. And this is a pipe that we just created it. In this case, is palindrome is a pipe, and then what it does is it takes an input as well as the argument, which we will talk about the arguments in a second. But here you can see that it takes an input. And in this case, where's the thing? The input in this case is x. Okay, it's a string that we want to check to see if it's a palindrome, right? Now, inside, you can see that we basically just try to ignore this part. Let's try to focus on this part. So basically, have a function takes a string and it checks to see if it's a palindrome. If it's a palindrome, it returns true. If it's not, we will return false. Okay, and then once we returns this boolean, what we're going to do is we're going to have our arguments. And this argument, basically what's going to happen is that it actually, we can be able to add a argument here. So you can see that we bring in the is palindrome pipe, and then the argument, which is here. So the argument is basically a another argument that we can pass in to use in our function. So inside this pipe function, or inside this pipe, you can see that we can be able to access the argument, and the argument can be null in this case. But basically, we have a switch statement, and based on the argument type, either is yes or no, or y or no, or y or n. In this case, we're going to return the desired string. Either we should say yes, or y, or no, or n for the is pipe palindrome, or is palindrome pipe. So in our browser, let's take a look at our browser. So basically, like in our HTML, you can be able to see that we can be able to display. So localhost 4. Just wait a second. Localhost. Host 4000. Okay, so I forgot. So we have to make it run it. So yeah, so basically, like in our HTML, you can see that we're basically adding this. So for each element in the is palindrome tests array, we're trying to pass in the string, and then we want to get the result to see if this string right here is a palindrome or not. So this will basically give us either yes or no in this case. We can also do y or n, which I'll show you in a second when the application compiles. And then we can also be able to use pipes within our component as well. So it's not like we can only use it in HTML. So you can see that we have our component. Basically, what we're trying to do here is you can see that we're basically creates this class here. So we have this word property. Okay, so use pipes in the component. This is the word, and usually the word is just equal to is a type of string and equal to word. And then in the constructor, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create an instance of the new of the uppercase pipe. This uppercase pipe is basically Angular built-in pipe, and we can be able to use this. And then what we're trying to do is we're trying to basically call this transform method, pass in this word, and it will be able to transform. And pipes, like I said again, they're just functions, and we can be able to call this transform method just like how we have it in our is palindrome pipe. Basically, this is the transform method that transforms the string and returns a the result, right? So this basically is the main method for the pipe transform. Takes the value argument, and same thing here. Basically, it takes this input, right? It's the value, and it just returns the answer. In this case, this .word. And then I think now it should be compiled. Yeah, so it's compiled. So basically, if we were to refresh, you can see that we can be able to chain pipes. We have custom pipes where we tell if it's a palindrome. EYE is a palindrome. QWE, that's not a palindrome, so we'll say no. 101, that's a palindrome. This is also a palindrome. And let's say if I were to change this to Y or N. I don't know if that's the, yeah, it's Y or N. Okay, so now if I were to see it, you can see we have Y, N, Y, Y. Okay, so we can be able to use argument in our pipe as well. And basically, this is palindrome pipe is working. And you can see that we also have this use pipe in our component. And now if we were to check, you can see that we can make it uppercase. And let's say if we were to, not this one, the components. In this case, if I want to just basically have a lowercase pipe, so lowercase pipe dot transform, you can see we have a lowercase. It doesn't. Let's try to make it uppercase here so that we can be able to see it. So yeah, you can see that even though the string right here is uppercase, we can still be able to transform into a lowercase by using a lowercase pipe, by creating instance of a lowercase pipe class and then call dot transform method passing the string, and it will be able to change this word prop, the value of the word. And let's take a look. So we can also be able to detect changes in Angular pipes. And here you can see that we have a input to check if it's a palindrome. And basically Angular execute the pipe whenever it detects a change for the input values or reference. But we will talk about pure and impure in just a second. But here you can see that when we have a input, right, that has a basically has this input is let me see where this, no, not let's see, yeah, so the palindrome string, and then when a user change this input, it will change the palindrome string by using ng module. And then here you can see we have our result. Let me just zoom out a little more so that we can be able to do this side by side. Okay, so yeah, you can see that basically when we have when user type in something in this input, we also have this palindrome string, and it check to see if this is a palindrome or not. So the argument in this case is yes or no. So it will display either yes or no in this case. And then if we were to check that in our browser, in this case, if I were to type in something, so in this case a Q, it works because it's a palindrome. If it's 1, then it is no, because this is clearly not a palindrome. If I type in 1 again, Q, now this is a palindrome. Okay, so yeah, basically we can be able to use, like, basically if we change, like, if we were to change the input, we can be able to trigger the execution for the pipe. Okay, so basically it detects the changes for the input value or the reference changed. So in this case, the palindrome string changed in this case, so it will be able to execute this pipe. And then let's say if we want to have this, let's say we have a button that when user click it, it will trigger this send method right here. And we can also be able to use async. This async pipe is also Angular built-in pipe as well. So basically, you can see that when we trigger this send method, this .message is an observable string, and then it will basically wait for like 500 milliseconds before it returns this string right here. So what's going to happen is that we can use async if it's observable, and then be able to display this in our basically display that in our page. So So far I think that was pretty straightforward, like how can we use built-in pipes as well as how can we create our custom pipes, and how can we use pipes in our component and be able to see the pipes can be able to detect changes when user change the input. So now I want to talk a little more about like how can we basically the differences between impure and pure pipes. I think I just closed the browser, so let me just do that real quick. And then I'm just going to change this, so delete this and then put this here. So basically here you can see that we have our component called pipes at events, okay? And then this pipes at events component basically has an input as well. And if user change this input, it will change the search. It will change the update the search user property in our component as well. And initially, it's an empty string, and then initially we have our hard-coded data, which is people, which is a type of person array, and then this person array is a interface. So here you can see that we have in our HTML, you can basically see that when user type in something, we have a result. This result, we have a result basically displayed a list of people. And then we have this pipe called filter person. And this filter person takes in this search user, the value of the search user, and then we basically just try to filter user based on the user input, and then we basically filter persons based on their name in this case. So if I were to click on this pipe, and you can see that I created this pipe in our custom pipes folder, and inside this transform method, it takes in this array of persons, and then an argument in this case is called search term. What we're trying to do is we're trying to basically like try to filter the person, right, based on their name for the search term. So the search term will be their name, and then based on the search term, we're basically just trying to filter persons that contains this search term. Person's name contains the search term, and yeah, basically here you can see that we're just returned in JSON format. If I were to type in something like Tom, you can see that Tom's shown here. If I were to type in Mark, we can be able to see Mark here, Rick. So everything work. And we can also be able to like change name when we user click on this button. So we can be able to change, we basically call this change users method. And you can see that here, change users method. Basically push this new class, sorry, not new class, new object onto this array. And then that's why you see Steve here, right? So what I want to talk about is the difference between pure and versus impure in basically in pipe, because by default all pipes are created impure. All pipes are pure when they created it. So we really don't need this. And what pure pipe is that it only execute when the primitive input value or changed object reference to the input value changed. So that means like if we have primitive types like string, number, or object reference like array, object date, these are object reference. If we change the object reference or the primitive input value, this pipe will be executed. So let me just show you in the code here. You can see that when we change the basically like change the value, like when we change the search user, because this is a primitive type. When this thing changed, the pipe is getting executed, right? And we saw that here, right? We saw that here. If I type in T, that's Tom right there. But what if we want to change the value in the object rather than the reference? For example, here we're not changing the reference, we're basically just changing the object. And what's going to happen is that, let's say if I were to type in Tom, and now I want to, actually, let's say if I want to type in Steve, which starts at S, and then here you can see that we have this method triggered. When user click on this method right here, let me just pull it on the side, change users, it will trigger this change user method when user click on this button. What's going to happen is that we're going to have this object pushed onto this .people array. And then guess what's going to happen? If we click on this, even though we actually push this object onto this array, it will not be able to trigger or execute this pipe, this filter person pipe, okay, because we're not changing the reference. And now if I were to delete this, you can see that we have a bunch of objects being pushed onto this array. But basically, you can see that the pipe was not triggered when we're not changing the reference of the object. So what we can do instead is we can actually basically concatenate, or I should say create a new array and push and like concatenate all the values inside the people array onto this new variable, and then push the new element onto this new variable. And then what's going to happen is we're basically going to assign this people to this new array. Okay, and then what's going to happen if I save, and then now if I were to type in S, change, you can see that it works, because every single time when we trigger this change users function, what we're actually doing is we're actually creating a new array and then basically concatenate all the elements in the existing array onto this new array, and then adding the new element onto this array, and then basically we're changing the reference, right? We're changing the reference. So in this case, that way works. Like we can use this way to do the searching or filtering, but there's another way we can do this, is we can be able to make this this pipe impure. And to make this pipe impure, we can just say pipe pure equal to false. And what's going to happen is that every single time, or I should say, it basically process or execute this function every single time. And let's try to see that in our code. And then this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back, because we're not going to change the reference, we're just going to change the value, the property value in this case. So if I were to go to the browser, and if I were to type in something, actually let me just refresh real quick, type in T, actually S, and then if I were to click on change user, you can see it works. So we're not changing the reference, we're just changing the property value, and it actually still works because it actually the pipe is being executed or processed on every change, even when the source data did not change. So it's not a recommended way to do filtering or sorting. Yeah, so it is not a recommended way, and it will probably be better to do the filtering and sorting in a separate component, so that we can have better control and on what to execute and what to not execute. So in the pipe, I also create this console.log Basically, every time when this pipe is being executed, we're going to see this in our console as well. So right now I'm just setting this pure to false so that this pipe is not pure. And basically every time when user click on this button, it will trigger the pipe even though we're not changing the reference. So let's go to a real browser to see this in our console. Because I also said that the pipe will like change, like the impure pipe will being executed on every change, even though it's not on when the source data is changed. So here you can see that I have a button that when user click on this change button name, it will trigger this method right here. It basically increments this .times by 1. And then when user click on this button, it will trigger this method, and then we can be able to see the change when the button clicked, and then the times will change as well. So let's try to take a look at this on our browser. And like I said, if I were to click on this button, the impure pipe will be executed as well, because because impure pipe will be executed on every change, right? It doesn't matter if it's the source data or not source data, so it will be executed. So let's take a look at that on the browser. Here you can see we have our browser, and if we were to refresh, we have our search user and button, as well as the result and the button click. And you can see that initially we have the pipe being executed, and if I were to click on something that's not related to the pipe, that's not related to the source data, you can see that the pipe is still being executed. And if I were to change this, you can see that the pipe is being executed, right? You can see this scroll bar going down when I click, and this scroll bar is still going down when I click. So you can see that everything that I do is just, even though it's not related to the source data, it's still changed. So that's the difference between impure and pure, and it is highly recommended to not use filter or sorting by using a impure pipe. So that's it for pipe, and I think there's a lot more about pipe, but I think these are the main things that you should know related to Angular pipes. So thank you for watching.